Okay, that's that.
Emily.
Okay, we're going to talk about globalization. Anybody have any idea what globalization is? Good definition? No? Just going to stare.
Or an example of like globalization in your daily life.
Oh, isn't it like when, like, I don't know, if like the United States goes outside the United States and like exports with other countries and stuff? Or it's like using the whole world and shit.
It's there.
It's there. I know it's something with the world. Right.
We have a short video. It's kind of dated, but it will kind of explain how globalization affects markets, and we'll kind of go into what it really is. It's like old-timey music too.
Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil. Remarkable statement? Not at all. The wood from which it's made, for all I know, comes from a tree that was cut down in the state of Washington. To cut down that tree, it took a saw. To make the saw, it took steel. To make the steel, it took iron ore. This black center, we call it lead, but it's really graphite, compressed graphite. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I think it comes from some mines in South America. This red top up here, the eraser, bit of rubber, probably comes from Malaya, where the rubber tree isn't even native. It was imported from South America by some businessmen with the help of the British government. This brass ferrule, I haven't the slightest idea where it came from, or the yellow paint, or the paint that made the black lines, or the glue that holds it together. Literally thousands of people cooperated to make this pencil. People who don't speak the same language, who practice different religions, who might hate one another if they ever met. When you go down to the store and buy this pencil, you are in effect trading a few minutes of your time for a few seconds of the time of all those thousands of people. What brought them together and induced them to cooperate to make this pencil? There was no commissar sending out orders from some central office. It was the magic of the price system, the impersonal operation of prices that brought them together and got them to cooperate to make this pencil so that you could have it for a trifling sum. That is why the operation of the free market is so essential, not only to promote productive efficiency, but even more to foster harmony and peace among the peoples of the world.
Okay, so like Zach said, it's kind of a dated video, but the guy who was speaking, his name is Milton Friedman, and he was a Nobel Peace Prize economist. So, and basically, I just thought it was really cool because we don't think about like little things like the pencil, like, oh my gosh, what goes into that to make it? And really, it's global forces at work. And with globalization, it has become easier for us to get these different items at lower prices. So globalization, basically, we just had like a short definition for globalization. And globalization is the trend towards greater economic, cultural, political, and technological interdependence among national institutions and economies. And basically, it's just that our world is becoming more connected because of trade barriers being lowered and exchange and trade.
So forces driving globalization, there's two of them. I'm going to explain the first one.
Okay, so the first one is technology. And the internet is really, really important. It's been helping companies to become more efficient, and they are able to quickly and cheaply contact each other, like managers in different locations. So They also help small firms to be able to enter the global market through the internet. And also, something else that's cool about the internet is that it's able to take out the middleman, because through cutting costs through production and being able to talk directly through the customer through the internet. And another one is email and video conferences. So this is helpful because it can help people operate across borders and time zones. And technology can speed the flow of information and ease the task of coordination and control. Email is very important because it can help managers stay in contact. People who live halfway across the world can still in an instant talk to another person or email them. So in video conferencing, it can cost a lot of money. It can cost as little as $5,000 or as much as $340,000, but it's an indispensable tool for these companies. And then, see, companies, intranets, and extranets. So intranets are basically, they just allow employees across the globe to access like a company's database. So it's not in like, I don't know, paperwork in one place in the US, but they can access it around the world. And extranets are, they allow suppliers for the companies to access information. This can be really helpful because it allows these companies to reorder stuff, restock, and they can do this automatically through the internet. And then the last one is advances in tracking. Yes, DJ?
Do you have an example of BGSU's intranet?
Canvas.
Yeah, thank you.
That puts it in perspective.
Anywhere you are in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the last one, advances in tracking. I thought this was really neat because this has helped a lot with shipping industries. Because it used to be that with ships, they would sometimes just stand or float in the water for like days at a time, waiting for like it to be unloaded and reloaded. But because of GPS tracking systems, like the companies can track where the ships are. So this creates greater efficiency. Like I read that a huge cargo ship can be unloaded and reloaded in just 15 hours. And this is pretty efficient because instead of having, I don't know if you've ever seen big cargo ships, they usually have like the backs of the semis on them. And so that keeps it really efficient compared to just individual boxes and stuff.
Another force that's driving it is falling trade and investment barriers. One of those is regional trade agreements. Does anybody know what they are? Can give maybe an example of a regional trade agreement? No idea. Yeah. Anybody? Any other ones? The other three big ones are NAFTA, that comprises of Canada, the United States, Mexico. The other one's the European Union. And the third one is APEC, which is Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation. It's mostly Southeastern Asian countries, all working in really cooperation to help boost each of their economies. It's really just kind of trying to keep boost economies locally rather than globally. It's just, hey, we're next door to each other, let's work together so we can benefit all of our economies. The other one is the GATT Treaty. This was signed after World War II. It was signed by 23 nations originally. And it was a treaty just to help reduce tariffs and reduce costs of exporting and importing. And since that was signed, tariffs have been reduced by an average of 40% to an average of 5% today. And they revised it in 1997 to include the World Trade Organization, established it. And it's like 157 nations are members. And it's since its introduction, globalization has really just taken off, especially in the last 10 years. And you can see it everywhere, which we'll actually explain a little bit later. And then also benefits of globalization. One's the ability to work around the clock efficiently and effectively. And one example of that is Hulu, which is created by Fox and NBC. They actually employed technicians in both the United States and Santa Monica, California, and they also employed technicians in Beijing. And what they do, the ones that work in Santa Monica, they kind of come up with specifications for codes that they use for Hulu, and then when they go, before they end the workday, they send it over to Beijing. They go home, go to bed, rest, and the code workers in Beijing, they write the code. And then by the time the technical crews in California go back to work, in their email, they have the code written for them and sent to them. So it kind of gives a 24-hour workday. You don't have to employ costly workers in the United States 24 hours a day to get these things done. You can get move your company's objectives forward faster. Another one is helping small business. Small entrepreneurs, it used to be that globalization was out of their reach. They couldn't go global because it was limited to big companies. But now they have the internet, they have email, video conferencing. So now they've been able to sell product across the globe. One way that a lot of them do it is through Amazon. Like the other day I just bought something from China for like $5. It's like something that would cost $20 to get in the United States, shipped to me for free. And it was just some small company in China that put some stuff on Amazon. Bought it. It was nice. I was like, wow, bought that. And it worked. Lower labor costs. Well, that's kind of been a rough issue for a lot of people against globalization. They feel like big firms are taking advantage of lower income workers across the globe. Reality, and we'll get into it a little bit later as well, but reality is over in a lot of these countries, these wages that we're paying them is actually a steady middle class wage. Over in China, I think the average middle class wage is between $9,000 and $16,000 a year, which over here we're like, whoa, that's way too low. But over there, that's a really decent wage. And then you can kind of see it in the United States between like cost of living in Ohio versus living in California, where DJ just went. She just said that she wouldn't be able to retire if she lived in California. It's because the cost of living is so much. But here, she'd be able to. It's just a difference. And it's the same in China. The cost of living is way lower. They don't need to make as much to make it. Availability of technical expertise. We can also go across the globe. We're not just limited to U.S. workers. There are there are people that work in other countries that have technical expertise that maybe people here in the United States don't. And I think it's The Simpsons, might be Family Guy, but they actually export their or outsource their animation to South Korea because they have technical workers there that can work cheaper and they do it better than animators here in the United States that they can afford. So they actually move. And then raw materials, obviously, in the United States we don't have everything. There's things like rubber that we don't have plentiful of, but maybe Brazil and northern South America has plenty of rubber. So we export, if we're going to make something with rubber, we put our factories there because it's cheaper.
Okay, so multinational corporations. So Walmart is a huge global organization, business. I think we all know that. But it's really interesting to see this. These are, in the green, are companies' GDP, which is basically like how much they make a year. It's like the measure. And then in the red are different businesses, including Walmart. So let's like put this in perspective. Okay, so Walmart employs 2.2 million people. That's a lot of people. And so, but because of that, its GDP exceeds many countries like Austria, Denmark, Greece, Israel, Portugal, and Egypt.
If it were a nation.
Yeah, if it were a nation.
Where is it? I can't see that far.
Walmart is the fourth one down here. Right here. This would be Norway, Argentina, Austria, South Africa, Denmark, Greece, Malaysia, Israel, Egypt, and in terms of if it were a country, its GDP would exceed all those countries and be right up there with Norway. So
yeah, it's just, I mean, it kind of puts things in perspective, like globalization, like, has helped grow this business. And if you don't like big business, I mean, okay, you don't like big business, but it still employs 2.2 million people, so.
There's obviously a huge debate on globalization, whether it's good, whether it's bad. It comes down to how has globalization affected you, whether you take a stance against or for globalization. For the argument against, a lot of it, the biggest argument is elimination of jobs in developed nations. And they actually did it's mostly trade unions and other labor unions putting this out there. They believe because a lot of unskilled workers are losing jobs. They feel that we're sending them all over to China, Malaysia, India, to have them do it. And the unskilled worker here is losing out on jobs, which is true, that's part, but they also fail to recognize that there's also job growth in globalization. For every $1 billion we export, 20,000 jobs are created. And 12 million jobs in the United States are supported by companies that are global companies that are trading across borders. So it's part true, there are jobs being lost, but it's moving from unskilled jobs to skilled jobs. So now kind of the future of that is in the future we won't be able to be an unskilled worker won't be as acceptable anymore, because there just simply won't be a job later in the future as we go more global. Another one is lower wages in developed nations. As you know, they got people in China and India, they're making $9,000 to $16,000 to be middle class. They're obviously cheaper workers. In order for workers here to compete, they would have to have a lower wage as well, or else their job's going to be gone. And big complaint comes from auto workers, and a lot of them make, it used to be they made $25, $28 an hour working on the line. And you have somebody in Mexico, you have somebody in China, they're maybe making $4, $5, $6 an hour working on the line doing the exact same job. And how you look at that depends on, I guess, how it affects you. From a business point, the way I see it, it's like $6 an hour, that's kind of, in the United States, maybe $10 an hour would be a fair wage to put tires on a car all day. That's what I think. Other people, they disagree with that. So it just kind of depends on where you're at with that. Then exploiting workers in developing nations, that's obviously another one. There's been a lot of issues with, like we just mentioned last week, factories producing electronics for Sony, Apple, Microsoft. They have to install suicide nets because working conditions are so bad. There's sweatshops. So and that's usually, in many developing nations, that's also the norm, for even if it's not a global company. And a lot of experts feel that is more of a political issue, and we need to work politically with these countries to increase standards. So, and it's also takes on the responsibility of these global companies as well to help facilitate that.
Okay, so for globalization. So the people who are for globalization say that with openness to international trade, it will increase national production. So it will increase the wealth and the efficiency of the nation. And also it will raise the per capita income. So I don't know if this makes sense, but by opening up your country to globalization, you're opening it up to competition. And competition usually creates more efficiency and lower prices. Does that make sense? So if you're isolated, and whereas if you're globalization. So this is what, for it's saying it's going to increase that wealth and efficiency by a certain country opening up to the global market. And the second one, it generates labor markets flexibility in developed nations. So basically, it's just kind of going off what Zach said. Okay, so yes, some people are losing their jobs, but there is a lot of benefits because people have more opportunity to get more skilled jobs. And with the more skilled jobs, you can have more flexibility. And this is particularly good for us, for young workers, because we can, with more jobs and more flexibility, you can change your job. If you don't like what you're doing, there could be another opportunity, or you can get some experience with one company and decide you want to go to another. So globalization really opens up that flexibility of where do I want to be, where do I want my job to be. Does that make sense? I know sometimes it can get really confusing. I had to read it several times to get it. So, and then the last one advances the economies of developing nations. This is especially true for India, because like India, like 20, 30 years ago, it was a complete slum. Like it was a terrible place to live. But now, because through outsourcing and through a lot of workers who are getting these skills, and because the cost of living there is cheaper, we're able to pay them less. And actually, kind of ironically, even though we do pay them less and their cost of living is lower, this is still elevating their living standards.
Can I interject something?
Yes, of course.
One of the things about globalization for you guys is, as a teacher, a new teacher just graduating, there are jobs all over the planet teaching in math, science, social studies, and English. So you could, if you decided that you wanted to live in Thailand, or you wanted to live in Ecuador, or you wanted to live in Korea, South Korea, or if you wanted wherever you wanted to live, you guys are prized commodities across the world. You may not be prized like you should be by the American public, but by the rest of the world. American teachers are in high demand and well paid.
Really?
Really.
Cool.
Just thought I'd point that out. And when you go into those developing nations, you're going to find that you can do a lot more with your salary. You can save more, and you can do more with the salary that they pay you.
There's a lot of impacts of globalization. These were the four main impacts that we identified. First would be labor, obviously a big one. Again, the big argument is that by exporting or outsourcing our labor to these other countries, we are promoting lower labor standards and lower wages. They actually, the International Labor Organization, it's not a very globalization business friendly organization, actually did a study to see whether this was true or not. They've actually found there is no evidence to prove that corporations are exporting. Actually, they found evidence to the contrary, that a lot of these organizations are going to countries and nations that have higher labor standards, are union friendly, they are promoting decent wages for the standard of living that they currently have in that nation. So that argument is losing validity very quickly. Let's see. We already mentioned that. Oh, and also the World Trade Organization did one too. So that's a very pro-globalization, obviously, but they found the same thing. So it has a lot all to do with future markets, which we'll talk about in a second.
Okay, so the second one, the environment. There's an argument that companies in globalization, there's kind of like a race to the bottom. Let's go to the countries that don't have environmental regulations, because then we can get away with polluting and destroying the planet. But actually, the evidence points to the contrary. It has shown that environmental conditions improve when a country becomes globalized, and the companies, and they open up their borders to companies and to foreign investment. So some examples of this would be Brazil, when they were under a military rule before they globalized. There was a lot of environmental issues. Now it's still bad, but it's not as bad. Mexico, before the NAFTA agreement, they've gotten better since then. And then, of course, Soviet Russia and just the Soviet Union, they were not environmentally friendly at all. But then after, the Soviet Union was no more, and the Warsaw Pact that kind of disassembled the communist nations, it's become better.
Okay. Then future markets is kind of an interesting one. I found this really interesting, just how globalization has affected most of these nations. With future markets, a lot of these companies, when they found that they were actually going into countries that had high labor standards and higher than average wages for income workers, they it's showing that they're investing in the future. Maybe not like 10 years down the road, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. These are like China, India, Malaysia. These are opening markets that are becoming, their economies are growing at a large rate. And they want to invest in these countries because these are their new markets. This is where current markets are going to be shifting over there. And actually in 2000, in China, 4% of households had middle-class status. By 2012, 66% of households had middle-class status. And by 2022, it'll be 75% expected, which is 630 million people. That's 630 million people we can sell products to. That's why they're putting their factories, distribution, supply chain, they're creating an infrastructure over there to serve these people. And the same story is in India as well. In 91, 42% of citizen households live below the poverty line. And 2002, 13.8 million households made up the middle class. And by 2010, that number rose to 46 million, which is about 200 million people. And China's GDP growth right now is 7.8%, and India's is a little bit low. No, it's higher actually, 8.3. I was mixed up. Can anybody guess what the U.S. GDP growth is right now? Take a guess, throw a number.
We wish.
Lower.
Five.
Lower.
0.5.
Lower. That was close. 2.8. And so you got China and India, their economies are growing 4 or 5 times faster than ours. But you also have to look at it from this way, that their economies, we grew by 12% annually during the Industrial Revolution, and this is their equivalent to Industrial Revolution. So it will slow down over time, but these markets are growing, and we're getting close to about another billion people that we can serve these products to and sell to. So, and you can tell that the United States is preparing for this as well. We just with our military focus, we just shifted it to Asia right now. We're building bases in the Philippines. We updated our bases in Guam and on Midway, and we're putting our ships out there. We're getting ready to, get a more solid influence in Asia, because we know that China and India are expanding. We also sent carrier technology to India, and we're sending planes and weapons there because China and India don't like each other, and we want an ally that we can use to stand up to China when their economy gets large enough to compete with us. So you can tell it's going to be kind of interesting in the next 50 years what's going to happen, and the fact that we're not going to be the largest economy anymore, obviously. So we're just going to see what happens to us. Who knows? Might be moving to China.
Okay, so the last one. So impact for us. Overall, it has helped increase our standard of living. It has been a critical engine for job creation. And as Zach mentioned before, that every $1 billion that we export, it creates 20,000 jobs domestically. And our cross-border trade, that supports 12 million jobs in the U.S., like Zach said before. And then, let's see, 1 of 7 U.S. dollars is made abroad, so 1/7 of our money is made abroad. 1 out of 3 farm acres, and 1 out of 3 farm acres is used, is exported, and then 1 out of 6 U.S. jobs is produced by export markets. So 6 of our jobs are because of globalization. So, and then, of course, there's also the possibility that we could lose our jobs because of global competition. So there's that downside.
Now we got a little bit of the game for you guys.
Yeah.
Let's see. Alden and Kenzie, one of you want to just come over here, and the other ones, you're going to kind of help facilitate the game.
Oh, wait, I'll facilitate.
Okay. All right, inside these are the rule sheets for you guys. So don't open them just yet. Don't open them just yet. All right. Basically, the basic things I want to go over is, just their rule sheets are in the thing. Read them. The person sitting diagonally from you, that's your partner through this whole game. You will be moving around the room here in a little bit. We're going to time it. We're just going to kind of give it some random time. Just let you guys play a few rounds of this game, get through it, and then once it's over, whoever won the most rounds, they're going to move to the next table. This would be table 1, 2, 3, 4. Just going to move. If you're both tied, then just pick somebody to move. Whoever wants to get up and move. Big one is you cannot communicate with your partner, and you cannot communicate with the opposing team in any way. You can't show, kind of give your partner hints of what kind of cards you've got in your hand. You can't communicate with your opponents, try to trick them into thinking you have different cards and you don't. So, no talking. No body language either. No cheating. Go ahead. I'll give you like 5 minutes to read over the rules and stuff. The no talking starts now. So you have to read them silently. Yeah, if you have jokers or little extra cards, take those out.
Well, it's okay, I'm not going.
DJ knows how to play it.
Yeah, they're just drama seconds.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, just Oh, just finding out
All right, even if you haven't completed one round, pick a team. Get up and move to the next table. No talking. So it's one team, just pick up and move to the next table. No talking. Start this in.
Hey, Zach, you basically.
What? No, you leave the card there. And start the game over too when you get there. Yeah. And then this time to make the rounds a little shorter, just deal 7 cards instead of 13.
talking. No talking.
Alright, so just, if you don't have somebody that's 1 overall, then just pick somebody to move to the next table. If you have somebody that 1, move to the next table. Alright, even if you're not done playing, stop playing.
That was actually clever.
Just say it.
Alright.
Hey guys!
Hey! Alright, so what do you guys notice happening as you're playing the game?
Everybody had gotten different directions.
And yeah. So, what did you guys notice happening as you guys switched tables and you saw that there were different directions.
We'd get little arguments, but we couldn't say anything. But we did.
And kind of, so when you got into those arguments, what did
I was
you do?
really
And
confused.
how did
We
you
were
find
so
the
confused.
how did you finally resolve it? Like you got
We just take it.
Yeah,
Is
somebody
there-
just grabbed a hot dog.
Is there anybody else that didn't just take it that
I got punched in the face.
maybe
I just kind of went with whatever's been on the table.
I was just following those. I was lost the whole time.
Alright, well the whole purpose of this game is to teach the future of globalization, and the key to the future of globalization is going to be communication. All these countries, we all play by different rules, just like you guys did. You know, different governments, they have different laws, different regulations, and if we're going to all work together and be able to work cooperatively, we all need to understand each other's rules and be able to play by each other's rules and be able to communicate. Because if we don't, things like what happened in the game where people get mad, people just take what they want, the other person feels down, they're like, what the heck? You know, we get into arguments like that. And in order for us to work better as a global society, communication is going to be key. And that's kind of what this game was trying to demonstrate.
We're not done.
Yeah, you covered. Alright, we got some teaching resources for you, and Emily's going to kind of go through a few.
Okay, so this is really cool. It's called Globalization 101. It's just like an online website of like lesson plans that are already made about globalization. Like there's culture, development, environment, and then, nope, don't go. And then like technology, trade. I mean, it's really, really cool. Like these are all made for you. Like it has everything. Materials, like even extra stuff it tells you.
It's assessments, competitions, they have articles.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Alright, this website is kind of the same thing as the last one a little bit. It's got activities that you can do that are centered around globalization. They can be for 9 through 10, but they also have 11 through 12 or middle school. They also have publications, links, and there's over 100 links that you can use that to help teach your class globalization or anything related to international business, anything related to globalization.
Zach, I saw one on that said, "Can underwear change the world?"
Yeah, I was saying that.
Could you go back to that?
Where is
Just
that?
no, it's hit the back button.
Hit your back button.
Hit your back button.
Yes.
I'm just curious.
Activity three.
I saw it too. I was like, can we read it?
Yeah.
When you buy underwear,
I mean, use it at your discretion. Okay, and our last one.
No, you're not.
No, it's not.
Okay, well, that one's basically the same thing about globalization, but it was done by the International Monetary Fund, which is a global organization, you know, pretty credible. So, and that had lesson plans with it as well. So.
Hey.